Everybody in the high country knows you don't go out in a whiteout to save an animal. You just don't. The mountain doesn't care whose heart is in the right place. It takes the soft ones first, the ones who stop to help. So when I saw her truck angled off the county road that morning, door hanging open, engine still ticking, and her small shape already gone into the white, I figured I was about to watch a stranger die. I didn't know her name yet. I didn't know she'd buried her husband 11 weeks before, or that she'd driven up here to do something quiet and final with his ashes. I didn't know that the 3 horses she was walking toward weren't wild at all. And I sure as hell didn't know what those horses were guarding down in that ravine, or that once she found it, none of us would ever tell this story the same way again. Stay with me, this one still keeps me up. The wind came off the ridge like something with a grudge. I'd been foreman up at the Delacroix outfit for going on 19 years, and I'll tell you the truth. I keep a little green logbook in my coat, always have, and that morning the last thing I'd written in it was storm coming, stay in. I underlined stay in. I am a man who takes his own advice about 4 times out of 10, and this was one of the other 6. Because I saw the truck. It was one of those little imports, silver going gray under the snow, nosed off the shoulder at a bad angle like the driver had stopped fast and not cared how. The door stood open. That's what got me. A closed door means a person who's coming back. An open door in weather like that means a person who forgot the world could kill them. I pulled my own rig over, sat there a second with the wipers losing the fight, and did the arithmetic every mountain man does. Visibility, maybe 40 feet and dropping. Temperature, low teens and the wind stealing another 15 off that. Ground already loading up with the kind of snow that doesn't pack, just swallows. And somewhere out past the fence line, small tracks already half erased, heading the wrong direction away from the road, toward the ravine. Stay in, I said out loud to nobody, then I got out. I want to be honest about my own motives here, because this story doesn't work if I pretend I'm a hero. I got out mostly because I couldn't stand the idea of finding her body come spring thaw and knowing I'd sat warm in my truck while it happened. That's not courage. That's a man who can't live with himself. There's a difference, and I've had a lot of cold nights to think about it. I followed the tracks. The wind up there doesn't blow so much as press. It leans on you, whole-bodied, and it fills your ears with a sound like a river you can't see. I kept my head down and my collar up in my hand on the fence wire for a guide, and every few steps I'd call out, and every few steps the wind would take the word out of my mouth and carry it off somewhere and not give it back. Then I heard the horses. You learn to read a horse's voice the way you learn to read a person's. There's the easy nicker, the greeting. There's the sharp alarm whinny that means predator or fire. And there's a third sound, lower, rougher, that I don't have a clean word for. It's the sound a horse makes when it's been standing between something and death for a long time and it is tired. That's what I heard. Not panic. Endurance. 3 voices of it, layered, coming up out of the ravine off to my left. And under the horse sound, thin as thread, a human voice. Sorry. I found the edge of the ravine more or less by falling toward it. The land just dropped, a steep white throat maybe 30 feet deep, cut by some ancient creek and drifted now into a bowl of snow. And down in the bottom of it, I saw the picture I have not been able to unsee in the years since. 3 horses standing in a rough triangle, 2 bays and a gray, all 3 shaggy with winter coat encrusted with ice along their backs and manes, so they looked half carved from the mountain itself. They weren't running. They weren't rearing. They were standing, deliberate, 3 bodies forming a wall against the worst of the wind, and their heads were all turned inward down, toward the center of the triangle. And in the center, on her knees in the snow, was the woman. She had her arms up, not defending herself, reaching. She had one glove off. She had her bare hand out toward the gray horse's nose, palm up, the way you offer yourself to an animal that could open your skull with one motion and is deciding whether to. And she was talking. I couldn't hear the words, but I could hear the shape of them, that low, steady sing-song you use on a spooked animal or a crying child, the voice that says, "I'm not going to hurt you. I'm not going to hurt you, I'm here. I have replayed that moment 1,000 times. A stranger, on her knees in a killing storm, surrounded by three half-wild horses, and instead of terror, what came off her was something closer to grief giving itself away. "Ma'am," I hollered. "Ma'am, back away from them slow, I got a truck." She turned her head, just her head, and even from 30 feet and through the snow I saw her face do the thing a face does when a rescuer arrives, and the rescued person's first feeling is not relief but fury, because you've interrupted something that mattered more than living. "They're stuck," she shouted back, her voice cracked on it. "The gray, his leg, there's wire, I can't." That changed everything. Because now it wasn't a fool about to die for nothing. It was a fool with a reason, and reasons are the most dangerous thing in the high country. A person with a reason will not leave. You cannot make them. I've tried. So the only way to save the person is to solve the reason. I went down the throat of that ravine on my backside, half sliding, one arm hooked in the fence wire till it ran out, and then just committing to the fall. And I fetched up at the bottom in a spray of snow about 10 feet from her and the horses. Up close they were bigger than they'd looked. Wild-eyed, yes, but not vacant. There's a difference between an animal that's lost its mind to fear and an animal that has decided something. These three had decided something. The nearer bay swung its head at me and pinned its ears, and I froze, palms out, and waited. And after a second, a long, judging second, it decided I wasn't the enemy either and let me be. "Talk to me," I said to the woman, low, moving slow. "What have we got?" Now that I was down there, I could see it. The gray horse, the oldest of the three, I could tell by the gray gone almost white around its eyes and muzzle, had gotten a hind leg wrapped in a length of old barbed wire, the derelict kind that gets buried in these gullies from fences that fell down before I was born. The wire had snagged on a root or a rock under the snow, and every time the horse shifted its weight it drew the barbs tighter. There was blood. Dark and frozen and fresh both, staining the snow and a fan around the leg. The horse was three-legged, lame and shaking with cold and shock, and it could not free itself, and it would not leave, and here's the thing that stopped my heart, the other two would not leave it. They could have. That's what I want you to understand. Those two sound horses could have climbed out of that ravine and run for the tree line and had a fighting chance to live. Instead, they'd chosen to stand in a triangle in a blizzard around a dying elder and give it their bodies for a windbreak. For hours, from the look of the trampled snow, maybe half the night. "I found them at first light," the woman said. She'd gone back to keeping her bare hand near the gray's nose, and the gray was breathing on her fingers in long, ragged clouds. I came up here to," she stopped, swallowed. Whatever she'd come up to do, she wasn't going to say it to a stranger in a snowstorm, and I didn't push. "I saw them from the road. I couldn't just, nobody was," her voice went to pieces on that, and she pressed her lips together and got it back. "Endurance. I'd file that word in my green book later. This woman had a well of it." "What's your name?" I said. Not because I needed it. Because a name pulls a person back into the world, out of whatever hole they've been talking themselves down into. "Marin," she said. "Marin, I'm Wade. I run the outfit 2 ridges over." I was easing my knife out of my belt as I talked, my old horn-handled folder, keeping it low against my leg so the horses wouldn't spook at the motion. "That wire's the only thing killing your gray friend right now. Cold second. If I can cut him loose, can you keep him from taking my head off while I do it?" She looked at me, and I saw her weigh it, this stranger, this knife, this offer. Trust is expensive when you've been recently hollowed out, and I could see she'd been hollowed out, though I didn't yet know by what. But she looked at the gray, and the gray looked at her, and something passed between the animal and the woman that I'll never be able to explain, and she nodded. "His name's," she started, then laughed, a broken little sound. "I don't know his name. I've been calling him Old Man." "Old Man it is." What came next took the better part of 40 minutes, and I'm not going to pretend all of it was noble. Cutting a spooked, freezing, wounded horse free of barbed wire in a blizzard is ugly, sweating, terrifying work, and there were 3 separate moments I was sure I was about to get kicked into the next county. The old man screamed once, that high sound that goes straight through you, when I got the first barb out of the meat of his hock, and he lunged, and I went flat in the snow and covered my head, and I felt the wind of a hoof come down where my skull had just been. And Marin, this stranger, this small grieving woman, threw herself up against the horse's neck and shoulder and put her whole weight into him and kept talking. That low sing-song, I know, I've got you, stay, stay, and by God the animal listened to her. It shouldn't have. I've worked horses my whole life, and I'm telling you that horse had no reason on earth to trust a human it had never met while a second human sawed at its bleeding leg. But it stayed. For her. That was the first time I thought, there is something between this woman and these horses that started before this morning. I didn't have a shape for the thought yet. I just felt it, the way you feel weather coming before you can see it. I got the last of the wire off. The old man stood there a second, disbelieving, then put weight on the leg, gingerly, wincing, but weight, and the 2 bays pressed in against him, and I swear to you the 3 of them leaned into each other in a way that looked like nothing so much as relief. Marin sat back in the snow and put both hands over her face, and her shoulders started to shake, and I looked away. Because a person is entitled to fall apart in private even when there's no private to be had. But we weren't done, not close. Because now I had 4 living things in the bottom of a ravine, 3 horses and a woman, and a 5th me. And the storm was not slowing, it was building, and the walls of that ravine were 30 feet of loose snow over ice. And lame or not, we all had to get up and out before the cold finished what the wire had started. Marin, I said, and something in my voice made her drop her hands. We got maybe an hour before none of us can move. Your truck's not making it in this. Mine might if I can get us to it, but these horses, I looked at the old man standing 3-legged and trembling. That one's not climbing this bank, not today, maybe not ever. I watched the words land on her, and I watched her understand what I was really saying, which was, you may have to choose. The 2 sound horses might make the climb. The old man wouldn't, and you cannot carry a horse. Here it is, the heavy thing, the morally impossible thing this whole story turns on, and I laid it at the feet of a woman I'd known for 40 minutes, because the mountain doesn't care that it's cruel. We could get the 2 young ones up, I said, quiet. Drive them toward the tree line, they'd shelter, they'd likely make it, and you and me climb out and take my truck and get warm and alive. I made myself say the rest. And the old man stays, and the cold takes him tonight. It wouldn't be a bad way, he'd just sleep. She was already shaking her head. No. Marin. No, she got to her feet. She was shaking with cold and with something bigger than cold. I didn't come all the way up here to leave somebody to die alone in the snow. And then her voice dropped and she said something that didn't make sense to me yet, something I wouldn't understand until part of this story I hadn't lived through yet. She said, not again. Not again. I filed it, I didn't ask. Then help me think, I said, because I'm out of easy answers and we're out of time. And that's when the old man, the dying gray, the one we were about to argue over abandoning, lifted his head and looked past both of us, up the far wall of the ravine, and made a sound. Not the tired sound from before, a new sound, a call, loud and deliberate and aimed. And out of the whiteout at the top of the ravine's far side, an answer came back. There was a 4th horse. I hadn't known. Neither had Marin. All this time we'd been fighting to save 3, and there'd been a 4th, up top, out of the wind, that had stayed up there for a reason. And when the old man called, it came to the edge and looked down, and it was carrying something on its back. Something that, even at that distance, even through the snow, was unmistakably the shape of a person. Marin made a sound I'd never heard a human make, half a word, a name maybe, and she started climbing that wall like it wasn't 30 feet of killing ice. Like her body had stopped consulting her about what was possible. I went after her. Of course I went after her. I didn't know yet whose body was on that 4th horse. I didn't know why 3 animals would rather freeze to death than leave a ravine that had a person waiting at the top of it. I didn't understand any of the secret yet, only that we'd stumbled into the middle of something that had started long before either of us drove up that mountain, and that the horses had known the whole time and had been trying, in the only way an animal can, to tell us. The wind screamed. My boots found no purchase. Below me the 2 bays and the 3-legged old man watched us climb, silent now, waiting. And at the top of the ravine, the 4th horse turned and started walking into the storm, carrying its passenger away from us. And Marin screamed at it to stop, and it did not stop. I have to back up. To tell you what was on the 4th horse, I have to tell you what Marin was doing on that mountain in the first place, and she didn't tell me the whole of it until much later, sitting at my kitchen table with her hands around a coffee she never drank. But you've earned it, so I'll give it to you the way I finally understood it. Marin's husband was named Cole. Cole grew up on a horse operation not 20 miles from where she knelt in that snow, a place called the Hensley Spread, long gone now, sold for parcels after a wildfire came through about 6 years back and took the barns in the range, and the way the story went, every animal on the place. Cole was already living down in the city by then, already married to Marin, already dying slow from the thing in his blood that neither of them talked about above a whisper. But when he heard the Hensley horses had burned, something in him broke that never set right again. Because Cole, as a boy, had a horse, a gray colt he'd raised from a foal. He'd left it behind when he went to the city, the way you leave a childhood behind, meaning to go back, never going back. And when the fire came, everyone believed that gray had burned with the rest. He carried that, for years, the guilt of the one he didn't go back for. Marin told me he used to wake up saying he could smell smoke. When Cole died, 11 weeks before that blizzard, his last coherent request was that Marin take his ashes up to the old Hensley Range and let him go there, in the high country, near where the gray had lived. He wanted, she said, to go back for it at last, even if there was nothing left to go back to, even if it was only ashes returning to ashes. So that's why she was up there, that morning, with a small heavy box in her passenger seat and no plan beyond let him go and drive home and try to figure out how to be a person again. And then she came around a bend in the county road and saw 3 horses trapped in a ravine in a blizzard, and one of them was gray, and gone white around the eyes and muzzle with age, old enough, if you did the terrible math, to have been a colt 6 years back. She didn't let herself think it. She told me she wouldn't let herself. It was too cruel a thing to hope, and hope had been beating her half to death for 2 years. But she stopped the truck. She left the door open. She went to them. Not again. That's what she'd meant down in the ravine when I offered her the mercy of leaving the old man to sleep. Cole had left the gray once. She was not going to be the second person that horse loved who walked away. She didn't know yet if it was even the same animal. She just wasn't going to risk being wrong about it in the one direction she couldn't take back. Now the 4th horse, the top of the ravine. I caught up to Marin at the crest, both of us clawing over the lip into the full teeth of the wind, and the 4th horse had stopped after all 30 yards off, at the edge of a stand of black timber that broke the storm into something survivable. It was a bay mare, older too, and on its back, lashed on with what I realized was a length of the same derelict fence wire twisted into a crude harness, was not a body. A pack, a canvas and leather pack, old, cracked, sun-bleached, the kind a rancher straps behind a saddle. In the whiteout from the ravine, the bulk of it over the horse's back had read to both of us as a slumped rider. But it was a pack. It had been on that mare, I'd learned, for 6 years. I don't fully understand it. I've talked to enough horse people since to know I'm not going to. But here's what we pieced together, Marin and I, over a lot of coffee and a lot of silence. Those 4 horses were the survivors of the Hensley fire. Not burned, escaped. broke out of a paddock as the fire came and ran up into the high country and never came down, gone feral, 4 animals living wild for 6 years where everyone had counted them dead. And the bay mare had been Cole's boyhood horse's dam, the mother. And when the humans fled and the fire came, she'd done what a good ranch horse does in a panic. She'd grabbed the thing that smelled like her people, the pack off the fence rail. And she'd carried it into the wild and worn it for 6 years, and it had become part of her, chafed into her hide. And no wild thing had ever thought to question a horse that traveled with a dead man's belongings strapped to its back. The gray, the old man, was her colt, grown old feral, the one Cole thought he'd let die. He hadn't. He'd been alive the whole time, up here, guarding a ravine and a pack and each other through 6 winters, waiting, in whatever way a horse waits, for someone to come back. And on the morning Cole's widow finally came up the mountain to say goodbye to him, they were caught in the one blizzard bad enough to trap them where the road could see them. I don't ask you to believe that means anything. I'm a foreman with a green logbook and a bad habit of getting out of warm trucks. I don't traffic in signs. But I was there, and I will tell you that when Marin walked toward that bay mare and its impossible 6-year-old cargo, and the mare let her come, and Marin's freezing fingers worked the wire and got the old pack down into the snow and opened the flap, I looked away again, because some things a man shouldn't watch. Inside the pack, ruined by 6 years of weather but readable, was a boy's things. A rope halter small, a folding knife twin to my own, and a photograph in an oilcloth wrapper protected just enough, a boy, maybe 10, arms around the neck of a gray colt, grinning the way you only grin before life gets its hands on you. Cole and the old man, when they were both young and neither of them had learned yet what it costs to leave. Marin knelt in the snow and held that photograph and did not make a sound. And the storm, which had been trying to kill all of us for 2 hours, seemed to me to ease, though I'll allow that might have just been the timber breaking the wind. And the old man came up out of the ravine. I don't know how. 3-legged, bleeding, done. That horse climbed 30 feet of ice that a sound animal wouldn't have tried. And I watched it do the impossible the way I'd watched Marin do the impossible an hour before. And I stopped being surprised by impossible things that day, and I've never fully started again. He climbed up out of the grave we'd nearly left him in, and he walked to Marin, and he put his old white muzzle down against the photograph in her hands, against the face of the boy who'd raised him, and he breathed on it, one long cloud, the way he'd breathed on her bare fingers down in the dark of the ravine. And Marin, who had come up this mountain to let go of Cole, reached up and put her arms around the neck of the thing Cole had spent his whole dying life believing he'd failed. And she held on. We got them down. That part's less mystical and more just work. Took the rest of the day and most of 2 neighbors and a stock trailer, and a vet who charged me a fortune and was worth every dollar. The old man kept the leg. He's got a limp and always will, and he doesn't care. The 2 bays and the mare came down with him because they would no more separate now than they had up in that ravine. 6 years had welded them into something that didn't have a human word, so we didn't give it one. Marin never scattered the ashes. She told me, months later, at my kitchen table with the coffee going cold, that she'd driven up there to give Cole back to an empty mountain, and instead the mountain had handed her back the living proof that the thing Cole grieved himself sick over had never happened. He hadn't let the gray die. The gray had made it, had survived and endured and kept a piece of him safe in a pack on a wild mare's back for 6 winters waiting. He carried that guilt his whole life, she said, and it wasn't even true. She turned the cold cup in her hands. I keep thinking if we'd come up a year sooner, if I'd made him come up, he could have seen, he could have known before he. She didn't finish. I didn't make her. Here's what I know. She kept the horses, boards them at my outfit, comes up most weekends, and the old man knows her truck by the sound of the engine and he stands at the fence for it. She still hasn't scattered the ashes. I asked her once, early on, careful, if she was going to. She looked out at the 4 of them in the winter pasture, the old white gray in the middle of the other 3, the way he'd been in the middle of that triangle in the snow. Not yet, she said. He went back for it, Wade. After all that time, he finally went back. She wasn't talking about herself, or maybe she was. I'm not going to be the one who leaves before I have to. I wrote that down in the green book that night. I don't usually write down the things people say, but I wrote that one. I still don't have a word for what happened on that mountain. I've quit reaching for one. Some things you carry down out of the high country and you don't try to explain them, you just